Ms. Nadine Maenza is a noted speaker, writer, and policy expert with more than 2 decades of experience as an advocate for working families and a champion for international religious freedom. She is currently serving as the chair of the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom and has also been vice chair during her 2 terms on the commission. Nadine is the president of Patriot Voices and serves on the board of directors for the Sinjar Academy, the Institute for Global Engagement, and Freedom Research Foundation, as well as on the board of advisors for In Defense of Christians. Welcome, Ms. Maenza. And we have Mr. Murad Ismael, co-founder and former executive director of Yazda, and was part of the Yazidi delegation to high-level meetings at the White House when Daesh was carrying out its initial genocidal attacks against the Yazidi in 2014. This resulted in the United States' intervention to authorize airstrikes targeting ISIS locations and the dispatch of humanitarian airdrops to thousands of Yazidis that were at the time still trapped on Mount Sinjar. Murad co-founded the Sinjar Crisis Management Team and the Nadia Murad Initiative, managing Nadia's campaign and laying the foundation for her Nobel Prize.
Thank you so much, Lynn, and to the Vegan Partnership, and also to Yazda and Haider Elias for inviting me to be a part of this, such an important event. It's such a community close to my heart, and for all the amazing work that you do at Yazda and throughout the year, this program as well as all the other programs on the ground in Sinjar, and to do advocacy and raise awareness of the issues. I'm also honored to represent the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, or USCIRF, as you mentioned, where I'm able to serve as chair. USCIRF is an independent, bipartisan U.S. government advisory body that monitors religious freedom standards according to international standards. And we make policy recommendations to the President, the Secretary of State, and Congress. So we're led by 9 commissioners, and we have a staff of about 20 professional staff. So USCIRF has long been and remains troubled by the state of the religious freedom conditions in Iraq, which we've been reporting on in our annual reports since 2009. USCIRF currently recommends Iraq for the State Department's special watch list for engaging in or tolerating severe violations of religious freedom. In August of 2019, I was able to be a part of the USCIRF delegation to speak at the 5-year anniversary of this genocide. Murad, who was the executive director at the time, and I've been working closely together ever since. So I'm especially pleased to be able to join Murad for this discussion. In addition to being, as you mentioned, the co-founder of Yazda, he's also been working on the ground to start the Sinjar Academy and is currently serving as president. And I appreciate about it, Murad, is not only is he always looking for answers to the big problems facing Sinjar, Iraq, and the Yazidi community, he's always helping people on the ground individually and also by starting this academy. So Murad, let's just begin our conversation. With you being in Iraq in this past month, how do you feel about the progress you've seen 7 years after genocide?
Thank you, Nadine. Thank you so much for having me in this panel. Thanks to Yazda and for the Vegan Partners for continuing this tradition. It's really important to commemorate the genocide and to respect the lives lost in this genocide, and on that occasion, I express my condolences to our people. I also hope that the hope still remains with the people who are still in captivity. As you all know, more than 2,700 remain in captivity, and the chance of rescuing them reduces every year. I think genocide is a heavy process, and I think what comes from it will go on for so many years, and I think it's a process also to recover, and that process requires all of us. It requires the community, it requires the friends of the community, it requires the state, the international community, and basically every one of us to do our part so that the community recovers and can restore its life as before the genocide, at least. Now, I did see some progress going to Sinjar. I did see that at least, some people have went back home, while ICE was planning to remove us from our homeland. So we were able to go back at least and have a place called home. I think the situation I think also the situation on the northern part of Sinjar was good, and thanks to the hard work of many NGOs and international donors who have really been committed to Sinjar and who provided, employment, business opportunities, a lot of small businesses that I saw, and also just a lot of help that came to rebuild houses. Well, actually, mostly schools, let's say, and the health sectors. Maybe in the housing, not that much help was provided, but in the other sectors, the international community have been very supportive to Sinjar. I think also one good thing, at least, was I was able to see Iraqi army and Iraqi police in most of the towns. Now, I think one of the big issues, as we all know, is the security. So the security within the Sinjar agreement still has not been resolved. I think the presence of militias and the groups are still a question in Sinjar that needs to be addressed. But I think that also should be addressed not through conflict. One thing I've been very worried about, continue to be worried about, is the possibility of armed conflict. Now, one thing we don't want Sinjar to become ever again a place for war. And that will require closer coordination, I think, between the central government, the Kurdistan regional government, but also the Yazidi community. I think one note we all had on the Sinjar agreement that the Yazidi community was not included, and I think that made the implementation very difficult. So one thing I would like to see, in a way, a modified Sinjar agreement, either through rewriting it or through implementation, where the Yazidi community can be included, but also something that can be applied in reality without conflict.
No, that's a really good point. And we at USCIRF supported the Yazidi agreement, the Sinjar agreement, but we were disappointed that the Yazidi community was not included. And we really only can support it as long as the Yazidi community and the residents of Sinjar are included in the implementation. It's really disappointing. Most people probably aren't aware that there hasn't been local elections in Sinjar since 2003. So we have a situation where the residents of Sinjar, the Yazidi community, they don't have a say in their own future, in their own governance, and letting other people choose their leaders. I mean, how is a way forward for the Yazidi community to be able to have that say? And why is the Iraqi government and others not fighting for the Yazidi community to be able to have a seat at the table?
So, I think generally, not just Sinjar, but other places in Iraq, like Ninawa Plain, especially the places that have seen a lot over the past years, the places that are called disputed areas, and they are disputed in many ways, politically, in terms of security. As you all know, a lot of lunging of attacks from the Ninawa Plain have been on the Kurdistan region. So the strip of land that I call that goes all the way from Kirkuk to Sinjar, I think we need to have an innovative solution for these regions. And I think that innovation will not work within the current and existing administrative framework. And for that reason, I support the discussion that was done before here to establish province in Sinjar and a province in Ninawa Plain, or probably a province in both regions. Now, that does not mean we are splitting from Ninawa, but that means we are making the work and the situation in Ninawa manageable. And Ninawa is a very big province, is a very dysfunctional process also for people inside Mosul. If now you go inside Mosul, you see the amount of destruction and the dysfunctionality. I think we should look into the situation. And I think one thing for the Yazidi community, and for the region is an administrative zone that will call a province, basically within the Iraqi constitution, everything based on the Iraqi constitution.
Right. There certainly is a process in the Constitution, I know, for making the Nineveh Governorate a region. And I know that there is an effort on the ground to do that. When I went through the USCIRF reports in the years coming up to the genocide to see what USCIRF was documenting, because as you know, USCIRF is an independent body. So I find that we're truth tellers, oftentimes raising issues long before the international community or the US government is really talking about them. And they actually talked about the potential for self-governance for a province in both the 2012, 13, and 14 reports. And the one thing about these reports that was really stunning to me is as they talked about the disputed areas. And first of all, talked about while there were some mass violent events in the years before the genocide, in the 2 years before, in 2012 and 2013, most of the violence was really against the Shia community. And this climate of impunity had emboldened the extremists. And so even though most of the violence at that point in time was against the Shia community, it had caused an environment where Christians, Yazidis, and others were leaving in pretty large numbers because of the fear that more violence was coming. And USCIRF pointed out several times about the quote, discrimination, marginalization, and neglect, particularly in areas of northern Iraq, or which the Iraqi government and the KRG dispute control. And so you can see this theme of disputed areas being problematic, not enough governance, not enough security, you know, as far back, at least in the parts I went back into 2012, and yet we're still seeing. Now, of course, the void has been filled by the PMF or the militias. And then once again, USCIRF is calling those out for heinous religious freedom conditions and also an environment of impunity. So, you know, part of the problem seems to be that all of these security forces, I was told by someone that there are 19 security forces. He listed them for me on the ground in Sinjar, but really, maybe only one or two answer to people locally. They almost all answer to Baghdad or the KRG. So you have this situation where the people on the ground don't have a say in their own security or own governance. So it is an interesting idea that this has been talked about for so long, yet so little movement towards it on the ground.
Yeah, so, you know, obviously the recruitment of 2,500, I don't agree about it, you know, and I voiced that disagreement because it was done in a very unprofessional and unconstitutional way. Now, I think one thing for whole Iraq, we need to de-politicize security. The security need to be totally separate from political parties, from militias, and definitely from foreign countries. I think one thing Yazidis cannot afford for Sinjar to become another Qandil, for example, or to become a conflict zone between Iran and other countries, or a place where Turkey continue to conduct airstrikes. What we need to do in Sinjar to remove all the interferences, all the mostly regional interference. Honestly, nobody's coming from the West to impose or to create any bases in Sinjar. We have a regional conflict in Sinjar that goes mostly between the regional actors. I think Iraqi government has the tools, but what makes me very sad is that even when it creates the tools, for example, the 2,500, the tools are not used in a right way. And this was an opportunity to create a security sector that was totally non-political, but we lost that opportunity again. And I think everybody should know that the hiring of the 2,500 wasn't done legally even.
So I've been hearing that as well. It's disappointing that part of the Sinjar agreement is these 2,500 Yazidis from both the camps and local are to be able to be hired to be security. The rumor is that militia leaders are choosing people and they're not actually being chosen from the Yazidi community as initially indicated and as the agreement states. I hope those are rumors, and I know that we're looking forward to seeing more information about this. But you know, our panel title, Inaction and Destitution: The Limitations of International Diplomacy, really do point out that, you know, having consensus among governments sometimes takes you to the lowest level, not the highest level. And what we really need is the U.S. government to be pushing the Iraqi government, the international community to be pushing for better conditions for the Yazidi community. You mentioned, you know, Turkey, you know, doing airstrikes in Sinjar, and you know, there's a threat of a military action, more military action there. Most people probably don't know the Turkish Interior Minister said just a few months ago that, quote, just as we did in Syria, we will build a base and monitor the region. And so there seems to be a real interest in expanding their footprint. And of course, you have Iran with the land bridge wanting to do smuggling through Sinjar and wanting to protect that for their business interests. So you have all these international players, and really only the international community needs to be supporting the Iraqi government and pushing against Turkey pushing against Iran, and being able to give this space so that this Yazidi and the residents of Sinjar could be making these decisions on their own.
No, definitely. No, I think you know, Turkey has other ambitions in Sinjar that go beyond PKK factor. And I think that's not, you know, there is no, for example, no PKK in Azerbaijan or Libya, where you see Turkey playing a key role there. So Turkey does have regional ambitions, But that does not mean we don't have a foreign militia problem in Sinjar. And for that reason, the Iraqi government should provide the solutions. And we have provided a clear answer to that. Create a local force, a local body within the Ministry of Defense or Interior. And let us bring all the young people from all the factions, because honestly, Iraq does not need anyone outside the Ministry of Defense or Interior, not Yazidis or non-Yazidis, because if we're going down the road of having multiple militias answering to people, to individuals, not to the constitution, we will never have a country. Whenever we cross interest of an individual, then you will have a civil war in Iraq. And Iraq was, on the edge of a civil war just a month ago here in Baghdad. So we cannot afford that. So the solution we are offering is actually good for all Iraq. ISIS is gone. Let's bring everybody under Ministry of Defense and Interior, and let's get rid of this problem. But the solution cannot be to make Turkey happy or anyone happy. The solution should be always how to ensure that the Yazidi community will not face another genocide this year, next year, or in 100 years. I think that's the main question, and I don't think that was the question, for a long time.
Right. We are pleased to hear that just in July, the U.S. government did put global Magnitsky sanctions on the PMF chairman, Fali al-Fayyad, although it had been a full year since sanctions had been placed on anyone for their behavior in Iraq. So at least we saw some movement. We're hoping that there'll be additional sanctions on people that are violators of religious freedom. But I did want to also mention that the State Department just announced an additional $155 million in funds to aid the people of Iraq and refugees in the area, as well as the communities that host them. So this is in addition to the $45 million already committed that would take this total to 200,000. So I know we're needing to wrap up time, but Murad, real quick, what do you think the first priority should be for USAID and the State Department in terms of supporting Sinjar with these funds?
I mean, I think honestly, there is no words to describe our appreciation to the U.S. In particular for allocating so much money for Sinjar. And a lot of the schools today are built by the foreign money, mostly U.S. money, and other European countries who have also been very supportive. Australia, Canada, and I think Europe and U.S. have really taken most of the load for this genocide. For the economic load as well, like economic load of this genocide, it is time for the Iraqi government to allocate a sizable budget, $1 billion. Sinjar needs $1 billion if we're going to rebuild Sinjar and we are going to restore life. And Iraqi government, now the oil prices are very high. Now it is possible for Iraqi government to allocate $1 billion for Sinjar, to bring people back, to create a local economy. The unemployment in Sinjar is unbelievably high. I think for the donors, it is time to move beyond emergency support to more, bigger economic projects that will be sustainable, that will provide employment. I think the employment is the biggest issue, and the 95 families who returned, from Sinjar to the IDP camps that Joy said. I think that's mostly because of economic factors. We need to create jobs in Sinjar. We need to bring water to Sinjar for agricultural sector. We need to create dams in Sinjar. We need to create a university in Sinjar. We need to bring technology to Sinjar. As you know, with the Sinjar Academy, for example, we want to bring technology to Sinjar because we need to bring Sinjar out of the agricultural sector. We have so many people who need jobs and they need good paying jobs. So I think a lot needs to be done on the economy, and sorry, we've taken a lot of time, and thanks a lot, everyone, for this great work.
Yes, thank you. Again, it was interesting when I was asking about my daughter about this conversation. She said any conversation Murad and I would have, because apparently we talk about this exact topic all the time, and we could go on for hours because there's so much to be said, and obviously about bringing the girls back and having the international community work closer together to do that. Accountability, justice. There's way more than this session. But I think the point is we can't just rely on the international community. We as advocates need to be pushing the international community, pushing the U.S., pushing the government of Iraq, and making sure that these issues stay in the forefront of people's minds.
Thank you so very much to our plenary speakers, Nadine Maenza and Murad Ismael.